lots of big influencers in the keto community immediately started talking about big pharma, and this is very unusual. This fire, and it was just when I was getting very popular on social media that this happened. So who knows what caused the fire? But all I know is that I'm a physician. I've dedicated my life to improving the health of people I come in contact with. And I will continue to do that, and I'll never stop doing that, no matter what burns down. Though the heavens may fall, I will help people improve their health. And if you don't like that, you can kiss my ass.
Welcome to the Red Pill Sangha podcast. Diet, lifestyle, spirituality, tales of healing. The Sangha, the collective, is waking up. Links below to my autoimmunity consults, online course, books, support groups, and live events. Check them out. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Red Pill Buddhist podcast, and I've been dying to get Dr. Ken Berry on. He's been such an inspiration to me. I'm sure everybody knows who he is, but in case somebody's come from my other strange interests, he has a marvelous book called The Lies My Doctor Told Me. And it's just, it's done so well, and just the work is great that he's doing. Also an upcoming book, I believe, Proper Human Diet. Is that it? Yeah.
Yep, that's it. That, and also another smaller book called Common Sense Labs, that kind of help you learn which labs to ask your doctor for, because very often doctors won't check any meaningful labs in your annual visit, and chronic disease can hide for years if you're not checking the proper labs. And so that book goes into detail about which labs you need checked and what the results actually mean. So that'll be out probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, excellent. That'll be useful. I mean, Ken has got a great YouTube channel. I mean, he's got about 1 billion subscribers or something now, and deservedly so. Whatever ailments you've got connected to keto and carnivore diets and whatever. I mean, if you've grown 2 heads or turned into a frog, Ken's got a video about it. So go and check. I've lost count the amount of times I've shared your vids. And also, I remember when I started my channel before yours, but I've talked about far too many dangerous conspiracy theories, so horribly shadow banned. But I think, something I was saying to Anthony Chaffee when he was on the podcast a little while ago, something that really gives me a lump in my throat is docs who wake up and start really talking the truth. I love it. I was outside my young son Peter's school a while ago, and I remember listening to a podcast that you were on while I was waiting for him to come out. And you said something about apologizing. You're doing it to apologize for harm that you caused unwittingly. And I was filling up. I thought, I'm going to burst into tears in front of all these young mums or something. It was beautiful. And so what was the point that you woke up, Ken? I think for you, maybe it was kind of similar to me, because I went through the whole rheumatoid arthritis thing, and that woke me up because I was writing plant-based books, and talking about that for about 30 years. And I had to throw out everything I knew about 10 years ago. What was the point that woke you up? Because I think you're a doc who went in, correct me if I'm wrong, but you went in because you really wanted to help people, not just earn a bunch of money, right?
Yeah. From the time I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a doctor and virtually nothing else. I entertained being an NBA star or an astronaut just for a minute, but it always came back to being a doctor and helping people. And so I pursued that career. I was classically trained at State University in allopathic medicine, earned my MD, did my residency in family medicine, which in your part of the world may be still called a GP, I'm not sure. And so started off my career I graduated in 2000, and I had always been slender, could never gain any muscle, but something shifted in my mid-30s and I started to gain lots of weight. And I was working full-time in both the clinic and the emergency department. So I basically lived in scrubs, which have a drawstring at the waist. And so I proceeded to gain lots of weight and lots of inches, but I wasn't really aware of that because of that drawstring waist. can be very misleading. As long as the scrubs still fit, you think, well, I'm fine. And so one day I got on the scale and I weighed 297 pounds. And so that's up from when I graduated high school as an 18-year-old, I weighed 190 pounds. And so that was far too much weight to gain. So I sat down and I had my lab tech check all my labs, and I was pre-diabetic. All of my inflammatory markers were off the charts. And I knew that I felt miserable, but I thought it was just because I was working so hard. But I had become an obese pre-diabetic. And so here's the doctor who's supposed to be telling people how to get healthy and how to manage chronic disease. And I have just gotten severely obese and became pre-diabetic. And so where I'm at in the world, people are very common sense. In the Midwestern Tennessee area, you can't be a mechanic and have a bunch of cars, junk cars in your front yard that won't start. If you're that guy, nobody will take their car to you, right? And if you're a hairdresser and your hair looks terrible, nobody will come to you for a haircut. That's kind of the kind of people I grew up around. And so I could not condone the incongruity of me supposedly being a healthcare expert and being severely obese and pre-diabetic. I couldn't condone that. And so I basically went back to the drawing board when it comes to human nutrition, because that felt like where the matter probably was. And I started reading far outside of my wheelhouse, my box, and looked at the paleo diet, the primal diet, the ancestral diet, all those sorts of things. And it's very common for a healthcare provider, when they really want to dig into nutrition or medicine, they'll dig into the most recent literature that's been the most recently published, because that's state of the art, right? But in my forays into nutrition and deep medicine, it kept occurring to me, human beings as a species, we've been around for a long damn time. Surely there's some anthropological or paleoanthropological research that should also be relevant, right? Shouldn't that be relevant? And so I started to just dip my toe in anthropology, archaeology, paleoanthropology, and it became quickly apparent that in the paleoanthropological literature, it's considered as self-evident that human beings are super carnivores and have been for over 2 million years. And so very often when a doctor wants to learn more about nutrition, they'll read the latest nutrition literature. But I think it's very rare that a doctor ever considers, maybe I should do some reading in anthropology and paleoanthropology. Maybe the answer is there. And so I definitely did much reading on the latest nutrition research, but I found that to be very often tainted with the researchers' preconceived notions. And it's just poisoned with the epidemiological research, which then the kind of the paramedical news websites will mistitle. And so a plant-based researcher at Harvard School of Public Health, they'll do an epidemiological research, and they'll have 100,000 participants. And in that 20-year-long study, so that's two things, makes it sound very reputable and very useful. They'll have done a food frequency questionnaire at the beginning of the study, which, for those who don't know, that's a multiple choice guess test that asks questions like, how many cups of beef ribs have you eaten in the last 3 months? That's one of the questions. And it's like, who can even answer that question? And so you've got the preconceived bias of the researcher, which the study's not protected from, because the study's not blinded, the study's not controlled. It's just epidemiological research based on food frequency questionnaires. And you also have the bias of the participants who are afraid to answer the question of how many times a month do you eat bacon, because they're afraid the researcher will judge them, because they know the study's not blinded. And so they fudge on their answers. And then it's very clear that in epidemiological research, if you're not very careful, the researcher's preconceived notion will slip into the results. But this is put on the in the journals of nutrition. This is the latest and greatest research. And so they do the food frequency questionnaire once when the study starts. They do it again 5 years later. Then they do it again 15 years later. And that's the data that's used to support the author's original contention that a plant-based diet is best. And so then I hear this thing on Twitter, well, this is the best research we have, so we have to go with that. Well, if the best research you have is shit, should you really base your career and your overall health and the health of all of your patients? Should you base that on the best research we have if the best research we have in nutrition is shit? I think no. I think we shouldn't use that at all. If the research is shit, we should call it that and ignore it. And so that's kind of the quandary I've been in for the last few years, is I've got just copious amounts of paleoanthropological research that show very clearly through stable isotope analysis that human beings have been super carnivores for over 2 million years. But yet now we're told such things by the dermatologist that, stay out of the sun completely, it causes skin cancer. Well, once again, let's go back and look at our ancestors. That obviously is dumb on its face. Well,
Ken, have you not seen all the umbrellas on the cave paintings and stuff?
Exactly right, right. And so then we're also say, you should avoid animal fat. It's very bad for your heart. You should eat these industrially processed vegetable seed oils. They're the newest thing. They're the best thing for your heart. And so basically you've got this huge cadre of doctors and dietitians and nutritionists who are completely bamboozled and flummoxed and misled by the big food manufacturers and the big pharmaceutical houses, because all of the research has basically been hijacked by big food and big pharma. And so any modern research, if it's an epidemiological study or if it's a food frequency questionnaire based study, that's shit. You just have to call it that and move on. There's nothing to see there. The food frequency questionnaire as a form of data collection has been thoroughly shown to be lacking and to be wanting. You basically can't collect any meaningful data. And the definition of data would be true, valid data points. You can't collect that with a food frequency questionnaire.
The trouble is there's such a massive pile of shit, isn't there? Because there's so many of those studies.
Yeah, imagine.
There's light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, there's that Harvard one recently, wasn't there, on the carnivore diet? But it's amazing that you've nailed it there with the anthropological thing, because, however much you argue with people, they always come back with the studies, and it's just like, well, what are we designed to eat, And that just knocks it. I didn't understand diet until I started to look at anthropology and then sort of circadian stuff, what you ate at which parts of the world, which times in the year, when would nature give you a few berries to eat when the sun's out and you can deplete deuterium or whatever. It's another amazing rabbit hole that seems to tie it all in, and we had Gabor Chomlai on a little while ago, and that was a bit deep for me. I just had to get my friend Graham Norbury on to translate that one. But I mean, this is what we've done as well in our book on the Red Pill Revolution website. And we've got the Red Pill Revolution book that's I think is great. I can say that because I'm only a fifth of the authors, But we've just done one that is the Red Pill Food Revolution. And we've gone into this of how we've been fooled over the centuries, with the layers and layers of nonsense by the elites. And looking back, you can see it centuries ago, can't you, with the control with plant-based diets to make people stupid and to make them weak and impressionable and over-emotional. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you follow any of the whole food plant-based Twitter accounts, you quickly see that irrational and that emotion and all that stuff. You see that very quickly coming out in their arguments Whereas if you follow any carnivore accounts, you see that it's hard to flummox them. It's hard to get them emotional because we tell the truth, move on. If you don't like it, I guess you'll grow up one day. But we don't get into the slap fights that are very common. And I think it's because our hormones are very well balanced. And I think it's because mental health improves so much when you're eating what I've come to call a proper human diet, which is mostly meat, maybe some veg if it's low enough in oxalates and low enough in lectins and phytates and other things like phytoestrogen. Maybe you can eat some nuts and some berries. Maybe you can't. I don't know. But I know that the majority of your diet should be fatty meat and eggs with the yolk. That should make up at least 70% of your diet. And that becomes very clear when you look at all of the research about human nutrition, both the modern research, but also the research done on ancient humans who used to eat by force. They had to eat a proper human diet because there were no Cheetos, no Ding Dongs, no Doritos, no Mountain Dew, no Pepsi, no Coke. There was none of that, so they could not eat that. They didn't have access to it, so they had to, God forbid, drink water, play in the sun, and eat lots of fatty meat. That was their life. And when we look at their health, which is still very doable by looking at the bones and the teeth and the fossil record, when you're eating a diet that's mostly fatty meat and eggs with the yolk and occasional plants, of course, because you don't want to starve to death, then your bones are much stronger and your teeth are much better developed. You actually have room for your wisdom teeth to fit in your mouth without having to go to the dentist and have those cut out. Yeah, just like we have room for all 5 toes on our feet, we had room for all 32 teeth in our mouth back then. It's odd how that now we all have to have our wisdom teeth cut out. Many things like that, the strength of their bones, how many cavities they had in their teeth, how many dental infections they had, how tall they were. All of these things seem to be optimized when we're eating a proper human diet, which is at least 70% animal foods. And so it kind of becomes foolish to try to use a food frequency questionnaire to prove that a plant-based diet is best in the light of all the totality of human nutrition research that's been done on all humans, not just humans in the last 20 years.
It's funny, isn't it? Because the people who argue with it are generally the ones who haven't tried it. And they think it's that mad. I mean, I did. I remember thinking it was mad. I went sort of 3 years keto thinking veg was necessary. And it's been 7 years for me now since I ate plants. And I think, I'd be dead by now if anything that the mainstream diet or the vegans said, the mainstream diet advice said were true, particularly how sick I was when I went into it. And that's the funny thing, because I turned 60 the other day. And I think I'm the only 60-year-old I know with a flat stomach, and I don't count calories. I don't do anything. I used to be really into exercise. I'm a bit lazy now and hardly do any. And, just playing drums really is my main exercise. And it's amazing, isn't it? And yet you still get these people. I mean, the savage attacks of the vegans. I've had death threats. I've had all kinds. And you're looking at a death threat on YouTube or something and chuckling about it. I remember when Sean used to say, prize for the best death threat underneath, vegans. And then you're looking at your inbox or something, you've got clients who are reversing untold things. And it's so weird, isn't it, to see that sort of, what's going on there? Why can they not see that logic? Even when you say to them about the crop deaths and stuff, it's so obvious. Anyone would say, wow, that's a good point. But still they argue. They hold on so dear to that.
Well, and I think there's several reasons for that. Their current paradigm does not allow for the truth that a meat-based diet is the proper human diet. It doesn't allow them to understand it. Also, for many of them, their financial remuneration comes directly from recommending and promoting a plant-based diet. And our good friend said decades ago that it's really hard to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on not understanding it. So I think there's part of that in there. Also, I think there's a very high level of immaturity in the plant-based diet community. And I don't say that to be negative or to throw stones. I say that because I remember when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I watched a documentary about how chickens are treated in a large poultry production, and I was mortified as a 10 or 11-year-old. I didn't eat eggs for 2 or 3 years out of protest for that. But then, as Scripture says, I grew up and I put away childish things. And so you have to do that at some point as an adult, but many people are kind of have an arrested mental development because of our modern society. It allows for that. But as you well know, if you've read much in anthropology, if you held on to a childlike magical belief in the past, you became extinct very quickly, because nature tends to weed that out very, very quickly. But now in modern society, you can grow up in an urban center of any part of the world and believe all kinds of stupid shit. And evolution is not able to get to you because of the protections, the multiple layers of protection that modern society gives stupid people. And in some cases, we even, pay for their food and pay for their shelter because they're so stupid. And so they're protected from their stupidity, and they're not forced to either grow up or become food for some other animal, because that was the only two options back in the day, right? Back before 12,000 years ago, that was your two choices. You either grew up and 1 + 1 = 2, or you became saber-toothed tiger food. That was your two options. You could not believe in magical foolishness on a daily basis. But what I would like for all of your listeners to know is that there is hope for them to shift their paradigm. And that's why I've made over 600 YouTube videos now. And I've had many people reach out to me, and I just got a direct message on Twitter the other day. And this is from a previously a very large Whole Foods plant-based is best account, who had harassed me for years on Twitter. Every time I would post something, he would be like, "That's bullshit. Don't listen to Barry, blah, blah, blah." He sent me a direct message, and I've got it right here. I'm going to read it. He says, "Hey, Dr. Barry, I have to admit that it's been a struggle to accept that the carnivore diet is a healthful eating pattern. But I've been on it for 9 months now and feeling better than I have in the last 2 decades. You won't get any more heckling from me. In fact, I was just on Dr. Baker's podcast, and I'll be a nurse advocate for anyone interested in meat-based diets. Respect." And so I just messaged back and said, "Excellent." And this guy has literally been harassing me like a mosquito on Twitter for years. Just everything I said was bullshit. Oh, it's bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Now he's like, "Well, actually, secretly, I've been on the carnivore diet for 9 months and I feel better than I have in years." So I want everyone to understand, every human on the planet, if they can still fog a mirror, their paradigm is shiftable. And that's really all I've been doing for the last few years on YouTube, is trying to slowly, gently shift people's paradigm a little bit with, "Oh, let's go low carb. Oh, let's go keto. Oh, let's go ketovore," because there's a natural progression. Anybody who starts low carb, primal, paleo, any of that, they're interested in nutrition. Even if someone starts a whole food plant-based diet, I love that, because that's the first step on the journey to a carnivore diet.
It is, isn't it? For so many.
100%, yes, because if you go whole food plant-based, especially raw whole food plant-based, you're very quickly going to be thin as a rail, not in a good way, but in a bad way. You're going to start to develop vitamin and mineral deficiencies, but you've already shifted your paradigm enough to think maybe diet is important. Maybe I should try a specific diet. And so when whole food plant-based does not work for you, as it's not going to work with 99% of people, you're going to develop problems. And at some point you're going to go, "Well, maybe there's another way of eating that I should try, because this doesn't seem to be working for me." So it's really a slippery slope to carnivore. If you start whole food plant-based, if you start paleo, primal, low carb, keto, any of those, eventually you're going to be eating a diet that's full of fatty meat and eggs with the yolk. And I win, and you win, and they win, Phil. We all win when they get on that slippery slope towards a carnivore diet. So when somebody yells at me and I'm like, whole food plant-based, that's the way, and you're sinful if you say eat meat, I'm like, "Hey, welcome. I'll be here when you're ready for me."
Nice. That's the attitude I have. I've got a blog post which shows me going from like 210 pounds as a fat vegetarian, lost all my muscle. I used to have a gym and train and got really big in the late 90s and whatever. And then by 2010, I was fat and rheumatoid arthritis and God knows how many other things. And so I went, because I'd been into the plant-based thing, and I went raw vegan. Oh, it's got to be raw vegan and juicing, and spinach and stuff, and hello kidney stones. And I did. I got down to about 120 pounds at 5'10", and it wasn't a good look, And you can see that sort of transition, and then get through keto and carnivore, coming back up to like a happy medium. And people say, I send this to people when they, they're looking a bit like that or whatever, which ever end of the scale. But I find that I've had loads of people as well who've attacked me. No major influencers. Well, one actually, but he never attacked me. But he was lovely. But it was whenever you get these attacks, then I think, well, just give it a year, give it a couple of years, and then somebody comes along like my thyroid's gone, my joints don't work, my arse is blown up, something's gone wrong, and then they start listening. It's a shame that it has to get to that point, because then it takes a while to turn around. But having been there myself, it's a good thing that I can take them through all those wrong steps. But I mean, you say it's stupid people and whatever, and I take your point, because it's a lot of it is to do with those ridiculous vegan propaganda films. If you're a sort of 14, 15-year-old girl, you see one of those, you're hooked, you're done, and you're an expert immediately. But how is it that anybody could come across Dr. Greger's website and then actually believe him? I mean, recently he did, I don't know if you saw, but he did a video on how to avoid hair loss. And also he was talking about how to gain muscle. I mean, come on, surely he's doing our work for us there.
Yeah, well, yeah, he is. But many of the younger generation have been trained very thoroughly, and rightfully so in some respects, to never judge someone by their appearance. And I think if you judge someone by their race or by their ethnicity or by the language they speak, I think you're a moron. I think there's no doubt about that. If that's your judgment criteria for somebody else, but they've misapplied that in a well-meaning way, and so there's room, I think, for a severely obese whole food plant-based influencer, because they're not going to judge them based on their body appearance in any way. But I think that otherwise good intention falls on its face, because there are many judgments that we can make about someone based on their physical criteria as to their underlying health. And indeed, there's been tons of research done in paleology and paleontology and archaeology that we've always, that's basically when we say someone is sexy. What we're meaning by that is that they have multiple markers of good health in their physical appearance. And that just saying that out loud is very offensive to some people. They're like, no, you can be healthy at every size. You can be, no, you cannot. This is proven in the medical literature that after a certain body fat percentage, you're not healthy, even if it's too little or if it's too much. Your risk of all kinds of complications skyrockets. It's a U-shaped curve. If you're too thin, if your body fat percentage as a man is under 10%, or as a woman under 15%, you're going to stop having periods as a woman. That's a huge red flag that what you're doing is not healthy. But yet, many young people idolize women with 10% body fat, 7% body fat, and try to emulate their behavior. It's like, no, you do not want to be in their cohort, I promise you. Or they'll say, well, I don't care if her body fat percentage is 40%. She's beautiful and she's healthy at every size, and I want to be. It's like, no. At some point, you do have to make judgments about people's physical appearance. And Dr. Greger, I think he's well-meaning. I think he's earnest. I think he believes what he says. I don't think he's trying to trick people. But you can look at him and you can tell that he is not an authority of what to do to keep a full head of hair. Now, there is some genetics that play a role in that, but there are also dietary things that and minerals that matter greatly as to whether you keep all your hair or lose some hair. When it comes to muscle mass percentage, Dr. Greger is one of the last people on the planet that you should probably listen to, right? And I'm not being derogatory. I'm being literal. We have to look at people and say, well, let's look at Phil. Does he look healthy? Does he look happy? Let's look at Dr. Berry. Let's look at Dr. Chafee. Do they look healthy? And if your answer is, well, I don't judge people on their physical appearance. No. We're not talking about making emotional judgments. We're not talking about judging them as a human being and saying, oh, their skin color's wrong, therefore I can't be friends with them. No, that's idiotic. But you can look at Chafee. You can look at Baker. You can look at Saladino and hopefully look at me and look at Phil and go, they look pretty damn healthy and they look pretty damn happy. Maybe I can make judgments based on physical appearance when it comes to health markers. And indeed, I think the literature very clearly shows that from the time we've been recording and studying this, human beings are very good at just within 10 seconds sizing up somebody and saying, yes, they're sexy or no, they're not sexy. That is directly related to underlying health markers. We're not consciously aware of that. We just think, oh, he's sexy, she's sexy. But what we mean by that is, I would like to reproduce with that person. And what our biology is telling us when we make that judgment is, this person is very healthy. They should be able to conceive, and they should be able to carry a pregnancy to term, and they should be able to breastfeed that baby, and they should be strong enough to protect and defend that baby, whether male or female. That's what we mean when we say someone's sexy. And so that's a huge problem in the plant-based community, is they refuse to make any judgment based on physical characteristics. But when it comes to health, you can make those judgments.
Yeah, you can. But then however good you look, I made a video once, why do carnivore dieters look like shit, because the vegans always say that. And I always say, whenever you're actually looking at somebody, also take their starting point into consideration.
Yes.
Because if somebody's been ripped all their life and then they get to 30 and they start talking about plant-based diets, they're going to look good. But what about if somebody's been 250 pounds or something? Or what about if somebody's got, some horrific disease and they've reversed it? And you've got to take this into consideration. But still, even when I give a big list of these things I've reversed, still the meat's going to kill me at some point. I remember Sean saying once that, if he gets to 106 and dies from a rock to the head, the vegans are still going to say it's the meat. But it's true. I mean, you do suffer some things. It's like people always, the vegans used to say to me, oh, yeah, well, your hair's falling out. And I say to them, well, until I went raw vegan, I had dreadlocks to my knees. I didn't have a haircut between 1979 and 2011. And I had that raw vegan phase, like 2010 to 2011, and things started falling apart. And so you bear some of the scars from the past,
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And anybody that judges someone just on one snapshot, that's obviously idiotic, right? You want to look at their full journey. And that's why I'm secretly happy when an elite level athlete goes vegan, or an actor or actress when they go vegan. I'm secretly happy because I know that in just a few years, they're going to be a case study on why you shouldn't go vegan, because as Sean loves to point out, oh, this athlete just went vegan or plant-based. Watch, they'll be injured and on the sidelines within 2 years. And literally every single time they wind up with a ligament injury, a tendon injury, a cartilage injury, because you can't build strong, healthy, resilient connective tissue on a plant-based diet. The building blocks just aren't there. And a great example is Robert Downey Jr., who's been my wife's celebrity card for years and years. He recently went plant-based, and we saw a post, like, I don't know if you know what a celebrity card is, but that's the one person in the world that if they ever showed up at your doorstep, I would pack a bag for Nisha and say, okay, go have fun. I'll see you tomorrow, right? That's the celebrity card. And so she has retracted now that he's been plant-based for a couple of years. We saw a picture of him. She's like, oh my God, he looks like shit.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm like, yeah. And so she's retracted that. She's looking for a new celebrity now. Robert Downey Jr. has lost the celebrity card in my household because he went plant-based. And so I'm obviously happy about that. But also I'm happy that so many people who idolize Robert Downey Jr. and think he's the sexiest man on the planet, they're now looking at him going, damn, he looks rough. What's wrong with him? And now, obviously,
it's just detoxing, Ken. It's just detoxing.
Right. Yeah. It's just detoxing that makes him look 10 years older. Yeah. Yeah. But so I'm happy when anybody goes whole food plant-based. I think that's an excellent first step towards your journey to a carnivore diet, which is a proper human diet.
Yeah, good point. And the athlete thing is interesting. I have a good friend, Tim Sheaf, who won, what was it called? American Ninja or something, whatever it is. And he was the world parkour champion and whatever. And he was like the vegan prince in England. And he had a vegan clothing company and everything. And I was out night fishing once, and I got this message on my phone. And somebody was saying, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My profession, it's going to be gone. And I don't know what, I just can't be vegan anymore. And then I thought, hold on, that's Tim Sheaf. And he said he'd been following my stuff because I was the only carnivore guy who was talking about the spiritual side of it as well. And he's got that side. And he was in a mess, and he'd been in one of those films, I think Cowspiracy or Forks Over Knives or some shit. And he'd asked for his contribution to be taken out of Game Changers before it went out there because he'd had enough, And I sort of helped him out with this. And then he got back to health and whatever. But the attacks that the vegans gave him, my God, because he was also their hero. And it was horrific, what they were saying to him. And then they said, oh, it was all because he drank his own piss, went on urine fasts and stuff. And no, it's not that. That's when vegans get so sick and they're desperately trying not to have meat and they think some weird thing is going to cure them. So a 30-day urine fast is the thing. But they're already desperate by then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that drinking your own urine is probably a good idea for most vegans. So at least that way you're able to capture some of the nitrogenous waste and maybe be able to build some good amino acids, because you're definitely deficient in several of the essential amino acids if you're whole food plant-based.
Well, as I often say to them, they should also probably be doing the old coprophagy thing as well and eating their own poo. Because that would really complete the diet.
Yeah, well, that's common behavior for gorillas, which are our least distant relative in the primate community. I don't say our closest because I think that's disingenuous, but they're our least distant relative that's currently extant on the planet. They eat their own poop all the time, and I think you're right. Maybe vegans would benefit from that second pass of eating the food for a second time after their colon bacteria have had a chance to work on that cellulose and maybe break it down a little bit. They might have access to more nutrition. And I don't I say that in jest, and you take it in jest, but there's many vegans out there who are considering drinking their own urine. It's only one more step to the back door, Phil.
It is. And then you could have, Dr. Greger might bring out his daily baker's dozen instead of the daily dozen. So he's got his poo on there as well.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be good. No, I think that I think this carnivore thing is coming up a lot, and it's very encouraging. A load of people are getting onto it, but then a lot of people say, you were vegan, so you went from one extreme to another. And I don't see it as an extreme. I made a video about it. Is it an extreme fad or a basic reset? How can we get it across to them that it's actually the basic diet rather than an extreme diet,
Well, that's one reason I talk about the paleoanthropology so much, is because, and I do that for just the common man and woman listening to our videos. But I also do it for doctors and for nutritionists and dietitians, because none of them received any training whatsoever in paleoanthropology. Most of them got a tiny bit of inadequate training in nutrition, right? But they didn't get any training in paleoanthropology, and they don't even consider, maybe I need to read in a more multidisciplinary way, right? And so if you ask the average nutritionist or dietitian, if you were going to read in another discipline, which one do you think would be the most productive for you to read in to understand human nutrition better? I would bet that maybe 1% of them would say, maybe I should read the paleoanthropological literature. But I just don't think that would occur to them. But when you say that to them, I think it opens up the human species from just what we've done in the last 20 years. You open it up like, no, honey, we've got research for the last 150,000 years on the human diet. And you've never considered that as a dietary expert? Maybe you should consider that, because one of my main missions is to reach doctors and dietitians and nutritionists. Because if I reach out to a truck driver or a hairstylist or just somebody unemployed and homeless, and they happen to see one of my YouTube videos at the computer store while they're milling around trying to keep warm, and they change their diet, that's a victory. That's wonderful. But what if I reach out and I reach a nurse or a doctor or a dietitian or a nutritionist? Not only am I going to help their health, Phil, but I'm going to help the health of every patient they come in contact with for the rest of their career. Now you start to multiply your effect on the world, because now this nurse on Twitter, he's a carnivore now, and he's going to be telling everybody, I was wrong. You need to eat meat and eggs with the yolk. How many thousands of people is that one person going to affect versus just that one homeless guy, at Circuit City who's trying to stay out of the cold and happened to see one of my YouTube videos on YouTube? Now you've got healthcare providers. And indeed, back in 2017, when I started speaking at keto conferences, every time I would say, raise your hand if you're a healthcare provider. And back in 2017, out of a room of 200 or 300 people, there'd be 2 or 3 or 4. There were probably several more, but they were afraid to raise their hand because they didn't want people to know, right? But I was recently at a big event in Omaha, and I said, raise your hand if you're a healthcare provider, and it was almost half the room, Phil. Right. And so when you've got doctors and dietitians and nutritionists and chiropractors and nurses on board, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, when you've got those kind of people on board, they're talking to thousands of people every day, either in their clinic or on social media. It's not going to be long before you're going to reach a tipping point where it's just going to become self-evident. And that's my ultimate goal. When I started this back in 2017, was to shift the paradigm and make it self-evident to the average person walking the street that not only is meat not harmful, eggs are not harmful, animal fat is not harmful, but they're actually beneficial. And so that's my entire goal, is to shift the paradigm so that people just take as self-evident. I'm a human being. I should eat lots of fatty meat and eggs with the yolk. That should be the majority of my diet. When that happens, I'm just going to retire from doing this, and I'm just going to be a sheep farmer and tend to my sheep and just say that you're welcome. The world is now a better place. I'm going to play on my farm now.
That's excellent. Yeah, I find that there's more resistance often from dietitians than there is even from vegans, because they're extreme experts, and I've had some horrible attacks from them. Sure. But docs are actually quite open. I remember doing a talk at the World Health Innovation Summit with some dude near here, and there was a lot of medical professionals there. And I did a talk on the carnivore diet. And it's interesting because the guy who was doing my YouTube at the time, because I'm terrible at any sort of tech, and he said, split it up into little videos. And one of them, there was about 7 of them, I think. I did all sorts of things, deuterium, this, that, whatever. And I did one, and it was just a basic one called Meat Myths, and it got a shitload of views, like 300,000 or something. You left a comment on it. It was like, whoa, Ken's left a comment on my video. That's great. And yet I had one section, and actually the docs were really receptive, and they talked to me afterwards, and they had a few questions and doubts, but very, very receptive. I think it was mostly to do with one section of the talk I did where, with the permission of my mum, who was 93 at the time, I showed pictures of her breast cancer reversing, where we did it with a carnivore diet and an iodine protocol. And that blew the oncologist away, and he turned around and said, how on earth did you do that? And I said, is that the first reversal you've seen, natural reversal? He said, yeah. I said, and you're an oncologist and I'm a drummer. I've seen a few, and it really got through to him, I think. But I had this video and it was titled, carnivore diet, breast cancer reversal, shocking pick warning. I really did a kind of clickbait thing on it. And it's still only got about 3,000 views. They don't like that, do they? They don't like the cancer reversals.
Right.
Because it takes away from, their biggest cash cow.
I totally agree. But oncology is one of the specialties that's really waking up to a meat-based diet, because an oncologist, which is a cancer treatment MD specialist, right? A lot of their reputation in the medical community is based on their cure rate, the percentage of people that you refer to them for cancer treatment that then don't die. They actually live and they have a good, healthy life, and you can keep them as a patient. So as a primary care doctor, I would have a particular oncologist who I had a good relationship. So out of the 10 in the metropolitan community, I would have this one guy who I know he's nice to my patients. But what if all of a sudden I noticed that cancer patients that I sent to this guy, who I'm like, well, they're dead. There's no way they're going to survive, right? This is already metastatic. What if he started sending those patients back to me cured and cancer-free and vibrant again? I would, as a primary care doctor, I'd be like, what the hell? I'm sending everybody to that guy, right? And so oncologists, fertility specialists, right, who help women get pregnant, who are having trouble getting pregnant, those are the two specialties that are currently on fire for a plant-based or for an animal-based diet, because they know if I put my patient on this diet, if I'm a fertility specialist, the odds that she gets pregnant go way up over the baseline of just doing my medical stuff. And then the oncologists are like, God, I have people who survive from degrees of metastatic cancer that I never dreamed that they would survive if I've got them on an animal-based diet. And so when you're having specialties like that, whose entire reputation in the medical community is based on their cure rate percentage, when they're getting on board, you know that this works, because they're not going to waste their time talking about something that's not going to have any effect, or indeed that's going to have a negative effect, which you would think an animal-based diet would actually make cancer grow quicker and kill people faster if all the mainstream propaganda were true. But it's obviously not true, because oncologists are more and more adopting an animal-based diet and recommending it to their cancer patients. And fertility, so at the beginning of life and what should be the end of life, those specialists are starting to recommend this wholeheartedly to their patients to increase their chances of success. And so when that kind of thing starts happening, I think that the whole food plant-based dogma propaganda, I think its days are numbered, because, these doctors, their reputation is hinged upon their success rate. And so they're definitely not going to recommend something that makes their success rate go down.
Sure, but would there be some sort of backlash against that? Because, there are so many cases where people have ended up face down in swimming pools who've helped too many people to fix their cancer. Sure. Would that same thing go on to the oncologists because they're not fixing it with the appalling chemo treatments and stuff? I mean, Ken, I've got to ask you at this point, and what happened with those fires?
Well, the office fire, so I had 2 fires within 5 months. First, my office burned to the ground. And this is the office that I had spent my life building. It was a abandoned building when I purchased the property, and I basically turned it into a southern Tennessee Taj Mahal of medicine, and it burned to the ground. 5 months later, my house burned to the ground, and both fires were highly suspicious. Both fires were investigated thoroughly by the arson investigators sent from the state, and both fires determined as undetermined cause. But recently, we've got an update on the house fire. A girl I used to date she's about to be indicted for the house fire because they found multiple articles of personal property that had belonged to me and my wife in her house during the execution of a search warrant. And so maybe the house fire is about to be explained but the clinic fire is still completely unexplained. And I talked to one of the arson investigators, and I said, "Dude, how can you not figure out what caused this?" And he said, "This fire was really hot, really fast. I don't know where it came from, but I'm just telling you something's fishy about this fire, but I can't find any evidence to figure out what caused it. So I have to call it undetermined cause." And of course, lots of big influencers in the keto community immediately started talking about big pharma, and this is very unusual, this fire. And it was just when I was getting very popular on social media that this happened. So who knows what caused the fire? But all I know is that I'm a physician. I've dedicated my life to improving the health of people I come in contact with. And I will continue to do that. And I'll never stop doing that, no matter what burns down. Though the heavens may fall, I will help people improve their health. And if you don't like that, you can kiss my ass.
Nice one. No, great. I mean, I thought it was great that you just continued on, didn't say much about it and whatever. That was great. But I've often kind of wondered, obviously you get suspicious. Can't prove anything, can't say anything, but that was a bit suspicious. You just did a bit too well with that book and stuff, didn't you, as well?
Yeah.
I think that was
But
really...
so the average doctor, their major fear is going to be either I'm going to be sued in a malpractice lawsuit, or I'm going to be chastised by my state medical board here in the United States. Anyway, that's the two major fears. If you start to recommend something that's not FDA approved or that's not standard of care. But you got to remember, all these doctors were like me when they were 12 years old. They wanted to be a doctor and help people. And so you've got this lifelong dream that's now, in many cases, been abducted by the standard of care and by pharmaceutical-based medicine and by the judgment of their peers. But you've still got that little 12-year-old boy or that 12-year-old girl that just wants to help people be healthy. So you've got this weird dichotomy going on inside their psyche and their soul. And so at some point, they have to look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm just going to be a big pharma shill for the rest of my career. I know that in my little heart of hearts, I want to help people, but that I'm afraid that that my office will burn down. I'm afraid that I'll be zapped by the medical board. I'm afraid that my colleagues will judge me. Or you've got this person who stands up and say, look, my whole life has been based on I want to help people, so I'm going to do that. I don't give a damn what my peers think. I don't give a damn what the medical board. If they want to find me, fine, come at me. I've had several run-ins with the medical board. They can kiss my ass. I don't care what they say. If they want to find me, if they want to take my license, which I still have, by the way, I've had my license uninterrupted since the year 2000. I've never lost my license, which is also a very popular mythology that the vegans love to talk about. But I still have an active license. I can show you a copy if you'd like to see it. I still take care of patients every day. That's not true. But many doctors are very risk averse, and they don't want their license to be, dinged. They don't want their colleagues to say, oh, he's a animal-based nut, don't listen to him. They're afraid of that stuff. But at some point, that little child who just dreamed of helping people and being the person that saves someone's life, I predict that's going to come out, and they're going to say, you know what? Though the heavens may fall, I'm going to do what I know to be right. I've used keto. I've used carnivore to fix my health. So why wouldn't I share that with my patients?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's funny because I've kind of got the same thing because, I'm a terrible coward. If a fight breaks out in a pub, I'll run away. I won't have anything to do with that. But there's stuff going on now that, we won't go into too much because we'll get the video pulled down. But, there's stuff that I'll stand up to and I'll die on this hill for my kids. And I've also experienced it as well as talking about all the health stuff and getting shadow banned and whatever. I'm also playing drums in the Daz band, one of the bands I play with. But he's the guy, Darren Nesbitt, who runs the Light paper in England that's causing a big stir, putting out all the truth. In fact, I've got a center page spread coming out with Vernon Coleman doing the plant-based side, and I've done the the meat-based side. And I think I crafted it for 1,400 words to get every single point in of anthropology, everything. And it'll be interesting to see what happens there, because a lot of people who've woken up to the other nonsense at the moment still haven't woken up to the business about diet. We've all got to go vegan and lovely, and, you know, Fauci and Gates are demons, but this plant-based thing, we've got to eat plant-based stuff. And it's funny because I've seen that side of it a bit. We've been playing a lot of gigs. We did this single, and it's just a throwaway song really that Darren's been singing for ages. But it was, you know, you can shove the New World Order up your ass, you can shove your poison vaccines up your ass and whatever. And so they didn't like that. They shadow banned it. We got it to number one for a short period of time, and then they kind of shadow banned it. But then we found at gigs, there's people sort of threatening, they're phoning the place. I've never seen such peaceful gigs. They're great people in there, you know. And the people are phoning ahead saying they're singing about Nazi propaganda and stuff like that. You know, there's some weird things going on, aren't there? As soon as you start speaking out, you get some weird people on your case.
Yeah, and I think all of us, once we reach a certain level, we start to pick up those weirdos that, like the nurse on Twitter that I was talking about earlier. And as long as they refuse to open up their paradigm to things like facts and common sense, they're able to kind of do these crazy seeming things. But once you drop the right truth nuggets, and very often it has to be done very respectfully and very diplomatically, often Socratically, so in the form of a question. And don't even make a statement, just ask a question. And that's disarming, right? And that opens up their mind just long enough for them to think about it. And when they start to actually think about it rationally, it's not going to be long before that paradigm shifts a little bit. And they may be holding on with fingernails and toenails, but when you ask that question and they're like, that's it. The barn door is open and the cow's about to get out. And that's kind of that's how I craft everything I do on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram, is I try to just open up the barn door just a little bit so they can think about this. And when they start to think about it without their preconceived notions, it's just a matter of time before they realize I've been saying stupid shit. I need to go back and start thinking about this again.
Yeah. I've seen this a lot. Some people who attack me and then become either clients or friends, and it's great. And they wake up to everything. I was so emotional. I was so nuts. I actually believed that the diet was compassionate. How could I not have seen the crop tests and stuff like that? And the whole cascade happens, doesn't it? You know, Ken, one thing I wanted to ask you about, there's a whole great big thing at the moment in the carnivore community of sort of certain carnivore influencers turning around and saying you need like 400 grams of carbs a day and whatever to be healthy. And particularly it's going to blow up the thyroid and whatever. That's another side of it, isn't it? That came from probably lab results going strange to start with and people panicking. But what's your take on this? Because Anthony's got a very, very interesting take on it that, you know, perhaps some of the people who have been, not mentioning any names, but been eating an enormous amount of organ meats have perhaps got some hypervitaminosis, and eating these carbs might be blocking the uptake of it and helping them to feel a bit better. What do you think about this sort of business that it's absolutely necessary to cycle carbs and that it's healthy to have 400 grams of carbs in fruit and honey and whatever? I'm fine with no carbs. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I think that it's always possible for anybody to become deluded and to stray from the obvious truth. And this has happened to a few of my friends in the carnivore community. And I have studied the human physiology very, very thoroughly. I was actually an animal biologist before I went to medical school. And so I have always been very interested in comparative mammalogy, comparative anatomy, comparative physiology. And there's just no human physiology that requires the intake of carbohydrates. This is anybody who says that betrays a severe lack of basic understanding of human physiology. And I don't say that in meaning to be derogatory to anybody. I have glaring deficiencies in my knowledge base in this or that or the other discipline. You know, I mean, when it comes to cardiology, after about 2 levels deep, I'm out. I have to refer to a cardiologist. I admit that readily. But human physiology and mammalian physiology, that ain't one of those areas. I'm very well versed in that. And I defy anybody to show me the physiological pathway that requires exogenous sugar, which is what all carbohydrates turn into when we digest them, right? Show me the pathway that requires exogenous glucose or fructose or galactose, and I'll shut the hell up and I'll go about my business. But I have yet to have anybody show me the physiological pathway that requires exogenous carbohydrates. It doesn't exist. And I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I'm not going to hold my breath until that happens, because I don't think that's ever going to happen. So there are many gurus out there in the keto world that say, oh, you have to carb cycle. If you're a woman, you have to carb cycle it for your thyroid health. You have to carb cycle for this, that, or the other. And my one question is, show me the physiological pathway. And when I ask that question, I never get a reply, or I get blocked, because there is no physiological pathway. It doesn't exist. And so if you took a young human and you fed them nothing but fat and protein for the entirety of their long, productive, healthy, happy life, they would never develop a deficiency, ever. Never have you put one molecule of fructose, glucose, galactose in their body after them being an infant, and they have to have their lactose, right? When they've gotten past that point, they never have to have another molecule of sugar for the rest of their life go in their mouth. And so all of the carb cycling and, oh, you need these kind of carbs, that's all foolishness.
Yeah, you mentioned about kids. I mean, it's been fascinating to me because I have kids of 32, 13, and just turned 7. I've spread them out a bit. And, my 32-year-old, we brought him up vegetarian. And he had, there were some horrendous issues happened. In fact, he had to have a whole vertebrectomy because of an aneurysmal bone cyst in his neck. And his neck is still sort of full of titanium. He looks fantastic. But, he's got certain things that are still carrying on from those days. And my daughter kind of in the middle, we didn't really understand. She's 13. I didn't really understand about all of this. And then she went more carnivore and she was cool. But my son, who's 7, I've been carnivore as long as he's been alive. And at one stage, he basically just had breast milk and meat. And he was the health of him, the density of him. When parents pick him up, because he's like ripped, he's got no fat on him. But he's so heavy, the muscle and the bone density on him. And they pick him up and it's like, whoa, he's heavy. And you pick up his friends and they're full of Cocoa Pops or whatever, and they just fly up. They're light as a feather. And the difference in him is, he's discovered chocolate now, but not enough to really damage his health. But basically it's, water and chocolate and meat. And he's still on it 7 years on. And I don't know, he's had a vegetable. He sometimes comes on and argues with me. He said, I did have some broccoli, but it wasn't in this house. I don't know where he had it. But, it's amazing to see what happens when you actually bring up a kid like that.
Oh, absolutely. And, we have Beckett, who's now 2.5 years old, and he has an appropriate amount of fat on him. And that's what you meant to say about your youngest, is that he's not overly fat. He's not.
Yeah. No, what
he
I mean
has the proper amount of fat, but he also
has
other
kids. Yeah.
But his bone density is much stronger, which is going to show up when you pick a kid up. How dense their bones are, you're going to feel that weight, and he carries more muscle effortlessly because of the diet you're feeding him. And Beckett's the same way. He's 2.5, and when you pick him up, you're like, God, this kid is heavy, but he's not fat. And that it's incongruous for people when they pick up this seemingly slender kid, but he's very heavy. They're like, what is up with this kid? But I'm like you. My kids are spread out over a vast majority of ages. My oldest is in his 30s. He's an attorney. My youngest is currently in the womb. She'll be born in 7 more weeks.
You beat me then. Well done.
Yeah, I got speed, Phil. But Beckett's 2.5, and he's 99% of the food he's ingested his entire life has been breast milk and meat. He was weaned at age 2. And he's been eating meat starting at about 6 months of age. The first bite of solid food he ever ate, he was 5 months old. I was eating a beef rib, and there was some remnants still on it, and he was wanting it, so I just handed it to him. And he proceeded to clean that beef rib with his gums and his 2 little teeth he had He cleaned the beef rib so thoroughly that when he threw it down in the floor, the dogs didn't even mess with it. It was so thoroughly cleaned of any kind of connective tissue and meat. That was his very first bite of solid food at 5 months of age. He never ate the puffs and the crisps and all the bullshit, basically infant cookies that they all make for the infants. He never has eaten that stuff. And his mental clarity and his ability to learn new things, even compared to my other children, all of whom I love and are very proud of and are very successful, he's off the charts, Phil, compared to my others. And they recognize that. They look at him like, holy crap, this kid blows me out of the water. But they all love him and they all love each other. But they understand that back then I didn't know better. I didn't know what was a proper human diet back then. So I did the best I could do, but the best I knew. But it was definitely not as good as I wish I could go back in time and do better now. But yeah, Beckett, I think he's a living testimony of what a 2.5-year-old should be. And I think when you start thinking about paleoanthropology again, could a 4-year-old child 100,000 years ago, could they basically just be a useless, helpless sack of guts? No, they would have been left behind if our modern average child were transported in time and they were now the child of hunter-gatherers 100,000 years ago. They'd throw that kid off the cliff, or they just leave them behind. But they're like, this kid's an idiot. This kid will get us all killed. And I think when you look at Beckett as a 2.5-year-old and the things he's capable of doing and figuring out and doing on his own as a 2.5-year-old, you start to understand how humans didn't become extinct. Because back then, the 2.5-year-old on average was not a useless sack of guts. They already had chores at 2.5 years old. They already had things they were capable of doing. They had dangers they were capable of recognizing and either hiding or running. They were capable of that as a 2.5-year-old. And that's why we're not extinct as a species. Because if you look at the average 2.5-year-old today, you're like, how did we ever make it in the wild? Because this kid can't do anything. I think it all starts with the diet.
Yeah, I think so. And also, I think it makes them extremely calm. It was funny. I remember when quite a few years ago, and I was at a birthday party with my daughter, and it was at some sort of indoor play area or something, and the kids had all the sweets and crisps and cake and whatever, and there was a horrendous mass sort of strop, like a tantrum, and they were going crazy, these kids. And my daughter was standing next to me and just shook her head and just pointed and went, sugar. It was great. They'd gone nuts. But Peter at school, my youngest, I went to his parents open day, meeting thing, parents evening. And the teachers were saying, he is so calm. He's so chilled and he's so affectionate and he helps others all the time. And he helps. And, I'm a small boy. I'm not, ideal dad that brings kids up. Maybe I get on well with them because I am so immature myself. But they were saying just what a credit to you and everything. And I think a lot of that's to do with what he eats, It's marvelous. I did a video on my channel. It was the two of them sitting there and talking about meat and eating carnivore and eating their meat. And I titled it Carnivore Kids Dying of Malnutrition to wind the vegans up and to get them to share it. And they did. It was appearing on Twitter on different channels. Oh, here he is.
Ah, there he is.
Here's Peter.
Hello.
You're at the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. See you later.
Bye.
Ken, there's one thing I'd like to ask. Well, two more things if you've got time, just before we go.
Sure.
I'd like to get into a little bit of kidney health because there's so many questions about it now. There's so many people use that as the last thing of like meat causes kidney problems. Of course it doesn't. But I've had an interesting experience recently, and also I've got a couple of clients with kidney stones as well. But after I was taking in oxalate foods for many decades, being on veggie type diets, and then when I went raw vegan, I was really killing it. I was making smoothies with a packet of spinach a day and turmeric and almonds in there. It was oxalate soup. And then about 3 months after I went keto, I had a kidney stone. And it was showed up as like 5 mil on a scan. And, because it often happens when it dumps when you stop eating them. And then it was like 5 mil on a scan. I was it was 10 years ago. And I was in Spain visiting my son, who was doing a course out there and whatever, and living out there for university. And I thought, right, it's grumbling. I know it's in there. I'm going to get it out. And there is a weird sort of Coke and asparagus kidney stone trick. I don't know if you heard about it. The sort of I thought, I've got to try it because I've got to get it out. Anyway, so I did it. But I mean, the agony. I had to drive him and his friends 2.5 hours back to Granada. I mean, the agony. Eventually, I couldn't even speak. I did get it out, but by that time, and I didn't know, it had grown to 11 mil in no time at all. I must have been dumping really badly. Yep. And then I, got in the hospital. They gave me some morphine. I'd have had cyanide that day. I mean, it's horrific. And anyway, but I got back to England, couldn't get it out. It calms down. It's whatever. And so I had it lasered out in the end. And no problems. I thought, great, sorted. And then suddenly I thought, because about 2 months ago, it became apparent I've got a kidney stone again. And I thought, hang on, I haven't had any oxalates for ages. And then I thought, well, if it grew that fast and I had that much oxalates, and people like Sally Norton are saying it takes like 10 years to dump, I thought I could have been growing that for ages. I could have been growing that for years and years, and now it's come loose. I'm going to have to deal with it again. But actually, interesting, aside from that, I thought, okay, right, I've got to go back into the medical system, which I haven't been in for like 10 years. And I've got to get a scan to find out where it is and how big it is and what I'm dealing with. And I got on the end of this urologist's day, I was like 5:10 in the evening, went in there and I started chatting to him. And the first thing was, you don't have to wear that muzzle for me. Please don't wear it on my account. He was like, oh, thank God for that. And we ended up talking for ages about the COVID nonsense. And then he said, why are you here? Oh, well, it's a kidney stone. Got that sorted in about 5 minutes. And then he started asking me, because I mentioned about the carnivore diet, and he started asking about disease. I was in there for like an hour and a quarter. And he was so open. He was getting links. I was sending him your stuff. I was sending him all kinds of stuff. And he was going, let's go out to dinner. Let's sort this out. I want to know about this. But anyway, big waffle, but a great doctor. It was lovely to find one like that who was open. But my question is about, oxalate dumping and stuff, because everything these days is blamed on that. I mean, is my assumption right that I could have been growing that for ages without any oxalates in there? And also, what is the sort of time limit of this? And so many people are sort of blaming everything on oxalate dumping now. Sorry, that's a big jumble of questions, but maybe...
No worries. So more than likely what happened, Phil, is you already had a very large kidney stone. And in the process of going keto to carnivore, it was actually shrinking, okay? Because very, very large kidney stones don't hurt at all. They only cause pain when they move in the urinary system.
Oh, no, it was cleared, Ken. It was cleared 10 years ago. That one that I had. It
gotcha. But what very commonly happens is people will have a very large kidney stone and have no idea they have it. And then when they go keto or carnivore, they start to clear it. It starts to get smaller. And when it gets down to about the size of 6, 5, 4 millimeters, then it can actually move in the urinary system. And that's when the 10 out of 10, oh my God, worse than labor pain starts, is when it can actually move. And so it's very common for people who've had multiple kidney stones in the past to have one more when they start keto or carnivore, and then to never have another kidney stone. And I think when it comes to the oxalate dumping, I follow this very closely. And I think there's probably a normal distribution curve. I think the vast majority of people in the middle and on this tail, they dump all the oxalate very quickly and it's out of their system. But I think there's probably some people over on this end of the curve who they're much slower dumpers, and it can take years to get all of the improperly stored oxalate out of their system. And I'm actually working on a YouTube video right now about, it's going to be titled 7 Things That Destroy Your Kidney Function and 5 Things That Don't. And you could probably guess which is which. But yeah, there's no research in the literature that shows that eating an animal-based diet is bad for your kidneys, that eating lots of animal protein is bad for your kidneys. That's a very common trope and a very common myth in medicine and nutrition circles. And very often that's the very first advice if you're diagnosed with a kidney stone, which 80 or 85% of the time is a calcium oxalate stone, right? The very first advice you're told is to stop eating red meat and to stop using salt. And it's like, okay, based on what? Where did you even get that advice? Is there a single research study you can point to that shows that stopping those two things stops the creation of calcium oxalate stones? Because I can't find that anywhere in the medical literature. And then also going back to the human physiology, what's the physiological pathway that eating lots of meat, salty meat, how does that turn into a calcium oxalate stone? How does that happen? And so, yeah, there's so much misunderstanding in the medical community about renal health and kidney health. They don't have a clue.
Do they not blame it on elevation of uric acid or something? Which I think is that more like a paramedic at the car crash? Is that more like cholesterol? Is that something that comes along to help with an oxalate dump or whatever?
It could be. It could be, but there is also a uric acid type of kidney stone, which makes up 5 to 10% of the kidney stones, but 80 or 85% of kidney stones are calcium oxalate. So very often doctors will say, well, stop taking a calcium supplement, which I agree with, but they never mention the second part of the stone, the oxalate part. They never mention that, because if they did mention that, then they would have to Google what are the richest sources of oxalate in the human diet. And then when they saw that spinach and kale and all the other things those are the most oxalate rich things on the planet, what would their dietary recommendation be, right? So they just focus on the calcium part of it, and then somehow they recommend stopping red meat and stopping salt. And it's idiotic, the recommendations, and their improper understanding of how calcium oxalate stones form. It's laughable, but then it's also not laughable. And you understand very well, Phil, you've had a kidney stone, and you understand that's no laughing matter whatsoever. That's one of the few things in life that women will actually say that was more painful than childbirth and labor. And when a woman says that, men better take notice, because you do not ever want that amount of pain in your body.
It's funny, 2 nurses have said that to me. When the last kidney stone thing, when I was in the hospitals and whatever, trying to get it sorted. And they said, yeah, I've had both, and kidney stones is worse. I don't know.
And anytime a woman says that, there's very few things they'll say that about. Yeah. If a woman will give you that, that's horrendous. You do not want whatever a woman says is worse than childbirth. You do not want that. And I mean, women should be applauded for being able to endure that level of pain, because once a man has a kidney stone, he has a new respect for women in childbirth and labor. He's like, God bless you.
Yeah, absolutely. So to finish off, Ken, I'd like to just say, I think how important it is to be getting this out there at the time, because there is a real kickback. There's this whole war on meat. Everything's being blamed on it. There's, the nonsense about the environmental thing and the farting cows and burping cows and whatever. And, they're creating these little muzzles for them now. It's just insane. Yep. And the war on it is getting crazy. They're faking pandemics. Oh, wash my mouth out. They're faking animal pandemics as well. And they're doing all kinds of things to get rid of the meat. And people are doing some great work, though. I mean, Neethi, our mutual friend Neethi, and she says to say hello, and she's seeing you soon, apparently. And I think we're both on her upcoming series, you and I, and our Red Pill Revolution guys, and Anthony, and, just to get the word out there. I mean, what can people do, really, not just even on the health side, but what do you think they can do to, supporting local farmers and things like that? What should they be doing with this horrific war on meat and making people aware of what absolute bullshit it is?
Well, I think the number one thing they can do, and the most powerful thing they can do, is to first and foremost eat exclusively a proper human diet, which is at least 70% fatty meat and eggs with the yolk. And then if they want to play around with some plant foods, I think that's probably fine for most people. Some of us should avoid all plant foods. I'm one of those. So the first thing they should do is fix their own health, Phil, because think about the credibility you have based on how you look now. And remember, we talked earlier about those are evolutionary cues. When somebody says, oh, he looks very fit, he looks very healthy, he looks very sexy, that says way more than just your outward appearance. That speaks to your inward health. And so, first and foremost, fix your own health. If you're underweight, you need to gain some weight. You need to do that by eating lots of fatty meat and lifting heavy things. If you're overweight, you need to fix that. You do that by eating lots of fatty meat and lifting heavy things. Those are going to fix you and put you in the sexy body fat range, which means a healthy percentage of body fat for the Homo sapiens sapiens species. That's the most powerful thing you can do. Because when you do that, back when I was 297 pounds, nobody asked me for advice on how to lose weight. Right? But now, if somebody remembers me from being that severely obese doctor, and then they see me now, they're like, oh my God, you look great, doc. Then the very next question always is, Phil, what did you do? And when they ask that question, the barn door is wide open, right? They're ready to receive what you're going to give them. And so fixing your health, that's going to reflect in your local community, your friends and family. They're going to ask you, what did you do? You look amazing. How did you do that? That's the first step, because when they ask that question, the battle's over. You've already won. All you've got to do is tell them what you did, and they'll go home and do the same thing. So I'm not trying to change the powers that be. I don't think Bill Gates is going to listen to me, right? He's going to keep up buying farmland to buy soybean, to grow soybeans and peas and corn. That's his profit model, because he knows that he can make shelf stable products that people will eat, and he can make a 200% markup on. That's his profit model. He's going to keep doing that.
Ken, I think the main thing is that he's got these man boobs. He can't be bothered to get rid of them, and he wants everybody else to have them. This is what's going on.
So, but I think he's worried about money in the bank. That's his primary motivation. But when people see someone like me talking about a meat-based diet, then they hear Bill talking about, oh, you should eat a plant-based diet. And they look at me and they look at him instinctually, perhaps even unconsciously. They're going to be like, that dude don't look healthy. Same goes for poor Dr. Greger. I love him to death, but he don't look healthy. And so when you've got these obvious incongruities, your unconscious self, your ancestral self, is going to migrate toward the guy that looks healthier. And I don't work out in the gym. I'm not trying to have some buff body that people lust over. That I go out and work on my farm. That's the extent of my workout. And your workout is on the drum set and in the bedroom. That's the entirety of your workout, right? So, but that's good, because you still have this very lean, healthy looking body. People are going to gravitate towards that unconsciously. So that's the primary thing, is to fix your own health first. Then when you've done that, you're going to start to attract friends and family members who are metabolically unwell. They're going to start asking you, what did you do? How can I do this? And then when you teach your friends and family, that's how we're going to change the world, Phil. That's how we're going to make multi-billion-dollar corporations declare bankruptcy, is because nobody wants what they're selling anymore. And I'm not going to go to the federal government and say, you listen to me, you change your nutritional guidelines right now. I'd be wasting my breath, right? But I'm just going to keep making YouTube videos, and I'm going to keep helping people face to face and one-on-one. I'm going to keep living the life that I proselytize. That's how I'm going to help change the world. You're doing the same thing. Everybody in this space is doing the same thing. Neethi's doing the same thing. And it's actually branching out. People that used to want to only grow kale and carrots are now saying, I think I'm going to get a few sheep for the farm. There you go. That's the solution. Then you can feed the kale and carrots to the sheep and eat the sheep. That's the solution, right? And so I think all of us are doing our part, but don't waste a single breath trying to change the powers that be. Let them do their thing, because the way that we're going to impact them is by killing their profits. And we're going to do that by helping every friend and family member we have, who in turn are going to help their friends and family members. And this is going to spread like any viral thing does, to the point where Bill Gates has got nobody to sell his pea protein to. And then we can all buy up his land at a discount and start raising cattle and sheep on
it. Beautifully put. Yeah, I hope so. And you're doing some great work. I mean, it blew me away the other day when, it was a couple of weeks ago, whatever it was, and I turned on the GB News and you were on. It's like, hey, Dad, I sent a message. Ken's on GB News. How did that happen? Little bits of truth coming through. And then by the next day they were back on. They had somebody going on about fruit and veg and healthy whole grains. So it's like nobody really gets it, but it's filtering through. But Ken Berry, thank you so much. Thanks so much for giving up your time, and it's been great chatting to you. And
it's my pleasure, Phil.
Where should they go? And where is the best place to get to see your stuff? I mean, your YouTube channel, obviously, and books, and let everybody know.
So I've got the book Lies My Doctor Told Me, which has been in the top 3,000 books on Amazon for over 3 years, which I'm told is unheard of. It wasn't on the New York Times bestseller list, but it hangs out somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 on Amazon, which most authors, when they look, they're like, how the hell did a book you wrote 3 years ago, how is it still 3,200 out of all the millions of books on Amazon? How is it still ranked that high? And then number one in your little niche. And I'm like, I don't know. I think maybe there's some important information in there. I've got the new book coming out, Common Sense Labs, which will be available in a few weeks. And then you'll have to forgive my ADHD, but Proper Human Diet will be out somewhere between 3 months and 3 years from now, because this is kind of my tome that I'm, kind of going to hang my entire career and reputation on. So I'm trying to do a good job, Phil. I've got over 600 YouTube videos. And the way that I did them is you can go to YouTube and just search for Dr. Berry and then put in whatever medical condition you currently have, or whatever diet you're thinking about trying, or whatever medication that you take. So Dr. Berry high blood pressure, Dr. Berry diabetes, Dr. Berry fatty liver. And you're going to find all of my YouTube videos that I've made about that subject. And not only by watching the video will you get what I think you should do, but down in the show notes, there's going to be links to actual research studies that will actually support what I've said in the video. And so if your doctor, your dietitian says, well, that's a load of crap, that's not true, you can say, well, he listed these research studies and I printed them out. Doctor, could you take a look at these studies and see where he's wrong? And because ultimately, as I alluded to earlier, what I want to do is I want to wake up doctors and nurses and mid-level providers and dietitians and nutritionists. That's my ultimate goal, because when I do that, then I have impact on 1,000 other people who they're going to interact with over their professional career. So those simple steps. And then I would encourage everybody, do not give up talking about this with your healthcare provider. Even if initially they get emotional and they get mad and they don't want to talk about it, keep, first of all, shining your light of good health and saying, remember, doctor, back when I used to be a type 2 diabetic, now my A1C is 5.3. Don't you wonder how I did that and how I'm able to sustain that over years? Aren't you curious at all? And when you say that sort of thing to a doctor, eventually they're going to be like, fine, what did you do? How did you do it? Teach me how. And then you've just opened the barn door again, Phil. And now that doctor is aware of this. They're aware of the therapeutic power of this. And sooner or later, they're going to try it with their worst diabetics. Be like, okay, for the next 90 days, I just want you to eat beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. I want to see what's going to happen with your A1C. And then you've got a carnivore doctor.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. I mean, it's great when they're receptive. My rheumatologist, I'd already wound him up so much. I mean, I haven't seen a rheumatologist for 10 years now, but I remember the last time I went in there, probably about 9 years, and I was pretty much on the way to recovery anyway. And I went in there, an appointment came out, I went in there to show him how I'd done. I was dancing away, jumping around in his office and going, do I look like I've got rheumatoid arthritis? I couldn't even walk like a year ago. And I said, look at the people in your waiting room. I'm the healthiest one in there. I'm lean. They're all fat. They're eating like chocolate bars out of their handbags and they're all got like crutches and stuff. He got so angry with me. he actually started frothing at the corner of the mouth, saying, you've got to take methotrexate or it's going to go in your heart, your lungs. You're going to get a malignancy. I just ran out on a tide of fear mongering. Then I had enough and never went back. But some are nicely open and they should be done. And I tell you what, I think one of the reasons that book is so successful is just basically what a brilliant title. How can anybody refuse that? You know, I also, I think I've done the same. I'm saying to my missus now that I looked on, I got a statement from Amazon and mine's still selling. And I called it Arthritis, the best thing that ever happened to me. And I think somebody with arthritis who goes and looks for a book, they're like, that's nonsense when they're really suffering. How can that be? But it led me to all of this beautiful knowledge, led me to everything I do now, all these amazing people that I've met. And it's a real, you know, when you get on a consult with somebody, it's not like, right, you've got this for life and you're going to have to take these pills. It's like, you fucked up a bit, but this is going to be an amazing journey. And you're going to come out brilliant. You're going to come out better than you went in. Isn't that brilliant? And the difference, the way it lifts that horror off them, you know, even initially, is beautiful. And when docs realize that they can do that, and there's more out there like you, Dr. Ken, then we're in safe hands.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Thank you so much, Phil, for having me on, and keep doing the work you do.
And you, man. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Music with the people, and the people got the power. Tell me, can you feel it? Getting strong.